Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you. Big deal for me. I never thought it would happen to me. You hear the stories, read the books, see it in movies, but it's always someone else. You imagine the moment when the truth hits, when the lies unravel, and you wonder how people don't see it coming. But let me tell you something. When it happens to you, it's a different story entirely. My name is Oliver Blackwood, and for the longest time, I thought I had a good understanding of my life. I had everything I thought I needed: a stable job, a quiet apartment, and a wife who seemed to love me. We were both in our late 30s, and things were starting to feel routine, in a comfortable way. But one night, I learned that comfort, that routine, was a facade. It all started when I woke up in the middle of the night, the clock flashing 3 a.m. I wasn't used to waking up at this hour, especially not when I didn't have work the next day, but something was gnawing at me. I couldn't shake this feeling of unease. Maybe it was the strange silence of the house, or maybe it was the way my wife, Ingrid, had been acting lately. Ingrid wasn't the same. She'd become distant over the past few months, and while I kept telling myself it was just the stress of her new job, I couldn't ignore the small signs. The late nights at work, the phone calls that she'd take outside, never with me around. The sudden need for space, as she called it. But it wasn't the signs that made me act. No, it was the feeling. The one that told me everything was slipping through my fingers, slowly but surely. It was in the way she would look at me, like she was seeing someone else. So, on that night, 3 a.m., to be exact, I decided I'd had enough. I got up and went into her study. Ingrid's study was usually off-limits to me. She spent a lot of time in there, and I respected her privacy. But tonight, something inside me told me to go in. I wasn't looking for a fight. I wasn't trying to catch her in the act of anything. I just needed to know. And there it was, sitting in plain sight, her journal. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Why read her journal? Why invade her privacy? It was a weak decision, yes, but desperation has a way of clouding judgment. I opened it. The first page was full of neat, feminine handwriting, detailing the usual: work, friends, a book she was reading. Nothing unusual. But the further I flipped, the more the words began to change. One entry caught my eye. I can't keep doing this. Every time I see him, my heart races. I can't stop myself from wanting more. How do I tell him that I've already chosen him? I read it over and over, trying to make sense of what I had just read. Who was she talking about? My stomach twisted. My mind raced. I turned the page, hoping it was just a random thought or some harmless fantasy. But no. There were more entries, more confessions. The same name kept popping up: Julian. Julian. I had never heard that name before. Each entry was like a dagger, more cutting than the last. The words were clear. She had been seeing someone else. Julian wasn't just some passing affair, either. No, they had a deep connection, one that Ingrid felt she couldn't escape. And what made it worse, what sent a chill through my body, was that she was planning to leave me. It wasn't just a fling. It was serious. He says we belong together. He makes me feel things I've never felt with Oliver. I don't want to hurt him, but I can't deny this. Julian is everything I've ever wanted. I froze. I had never felt so powerless. I'd been so blind, so consumed with my own complacency, that I hadn't seen this coming. I hadn't even noticed the cracks forming until they were deep enough to swallow me whole. But there was more. As I kept flipping through the journal, one final entry caught my attention, dated only a few hours before. Julian and I are leaving tomorrow. I've made up my mind. Oliver doesn't deserve this, but I deserve to be happy. I'm going to tell him tonight. It's over. My heart stopped. She was planning to leave me. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had spent years with, had already made her choice. And as I sat there, in the dead of night, holding her journal in my hands, I realized the truth. She wasn't coming back. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. My hands shook as I placed the journal back on the desk. And then, as if fate had a sick sense of humor, I noticed something else: a small envelope on the edge of the desk. It wasn't there before. Curious, I opened it. Inside was a note. A farewell note. Oliver, I'm sorry. I really am. But I can't do this anymore. I've made my decision, and Julian is the one I want. Please don't try to reach out. I need this. For me. Goodbye. Ingrid. I could hardly read the words through the blur of my tears. I hadn't expected it to hurt like this. I never thought I'd find out like this, at 3 a.m., sitting in the dark, reading a note meant for someone else. But what hurt the most wasn't the note itself. It was the realization that I had been living in a lie. Everything I thought I knew about our life, about my marriage, had been shattered in an instant. I thought I knew who my wife was. I thought I knew her heart. But it turns out, I never really did. The silence in the house was deafening. It was the silence of truth. The silence of everything falling apart. And that was just the beginning. To understand how deep this betrayal ran, you'll have to wait for the next part. I couldn't sleep that night. It wasn't just the note or the revelation of Ingrid's affair that kept me awake. It was the suffocating feeling of betrayal that wrapped around my chest. I could hear the ticking of the clock in the silence of the room, each tick echoing louder than the last. How long had she been planning this? How many nights had she laid beside me, pretending everything was fine, while secretly making plans to leave me for Julian? I had never felt more alone in my life. The next morning, everything felt different. It wasn't the normal sense of dread or unease you feel when you know something's off. No, this was worse. This was the moment I realized I was no longer part of her life. I was just an obstacle in the way of something new, something she had been quietly building behind my back. Ingrid didn't act any differently when she woke up. She went about her usual routine, making coffee, getting ready for work, humming a tune as though nothing had changed. But I could see the way she avoided my gaze, the subtle way she kept her distance. The truth was out, but I didn't know what to do with it. I had so many questions. How could she do this? What was so special about Julian? Why hadn't she talked to me about it? But most importantly, how long had she been planning this? I decided to confront her. But not yet. Not until I had more answers. I couldn't just go charging in, demanding the truth. That's not who I was. I needed to think, to plan. That night, when she came home, she was more distant than usual. She kept her responses short, and the tension between us felt suffocating. But I didn't say anything. I didn't ask her where she had been or who she had been with. I knew if I did, she would just lie to me. I didn't need more lies. What I needed was the truth. And then, just when I thought I couldn't stand another moment of silence, she left the room. She didn't say goodbye, didn't tell me where she was going. She just left. I watched her go, my heart pounding in my chest. There was something off about the way she moved, like she was rushing to meet someone. Julian, I thought. She was going to see him. I had to know. I grabbed my coat and followed her. It wasn't that I didn't trust her, I didn't trust myself anymore. My mind was spinning, trying to make sense of everything, trying to find some justification for the mess we were in. I had to know the truth, even if it hurt. I followed her for a while, keeping a safe distance, until she turned down a quiet street. She stopped in front of a nondescript building, a place I didn't recognize. I waited for her to go inside, and then I crept closer. My pulse was racing, my thoughts clouded with a mix of anger and confusion. The door to the building opened, and out walked Julian. He was tall, with dark hair, and I could see the way he looked at Ingrid, like she was the only person in the world. They exchanged a quick, tight hug before he walked away, and Ingrid disappeared inside. I stood frozen for what felt like an eternity. This was it. This was the proof I needed. She wasn't just seeing him. She was leaving me for him. But that wasn't the worst part. No, the worst part came when I saw something else, something I hadn't expected. Through the cracked door of the building, I saw them. Ingrid and Julian, sitting together, talking quietly. And then, without warning, they kissed. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. The kiss wasn't a quick peck or a casual greeting. It was a kiss that spoke volumes. It was the kiss of someone who had already made up their mind. And I wasn't part of that decision. I turned and walked away, the bitter taste of betrayal heavy in my mouth. The rest of the night passed in a blur. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind kept replaying that kiss, the way Ingrid looked at Julian, the way she had completely discarded everything we had built together. And the worst part? I knew I couldn't change any of it. The next morning, Ingrid acted like nothing had happened. She went about her day, her face a mask of indifference. I wanted to scream, to confront her, but I held back. I didn't know if I could handle the truth, or if she even cared enough to give me one. Later that night, after Ingrid had gone to bed, I sat down and read the farewell note again. It still felt unreal, like a dream I couldn't wake up from. But this time, something else caught my eye. Beneath her name, beneath the words goodbye, there was a date, tomorrow. I stared at the note for what felt like hours, the weight of those words sinking deeper with each passing minute. Tomorrow. That's when Ingrid was planning to leave me. And what hit me hardest was the fact that she was already moving on. She had made up her mind, and there was no space left for me in her world. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt. It was the realization that all those years together meant nothing to her. She had found someone else, someone who made her feel alive again, while I had been stuck, oblivious to the slow unraveling of everything we built. But I couldn't let it end like this. I couldn't just sit back and accept that she was leaving. There was something inside me that refused to give up without a fight, even if I knew deep down that the battle was already lost. The next morning, Ingrid was her usual self. She greeted me with a forced smile, asked about my plans for the day, and kissed me goodbye like she had every other morning. It was almost too normal, too routine. But I could see the cracks in her act, the way her eyes avoided mine, the slight tension in her shoulders. She knew. She knew I had found the note. She knew I was no longer the oblivious fool I once was. She left for work, and I sat there, paralyzed by the thought of what was about to happen. I didn't want to just wait for her to come home and tell me she was leaving. I needed to act. But what could I do? What was left to say when everything had already been decided without my input? I spent the entire day pacing around the apartment, trying to keep my mind occupied. But every corner, every room, reminded me of her absence, of how little I truly knew her. It wasn't until the late afternoon that I realized I had to confront her, but not here, not in the safety of our home. No, I needed to confront her where it all started, the cafe, the place she had met Julian the other night. I drove there in silence, the engine hum of the car filling the emptiness in my chest. My mind raced with 1,000 questions, but none of them seemed important anymore. What I needed now was the truth. I had to know what Julian had that I didn't. I had to know why Ingrid had chosen him. When I arrived at the cafe, I saw Ingrid's car parked outside. I parked a little further down the street, not wanting to alert her. My heart pounded as I walked toward the entrance, trying to calm my nerves. I pushed open the door and stepped inside, scanning the room for her. And then I saw them. They were sitting at a corner table, laughing, just like before. Ingrid's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen in months. She was leaning in, hanging on every word Julian said, completely lost in him. They didn't even notice me at first. It was like I wasn't there. And then, Julian reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair behind Ingrid's ear. The touch was intimate, tender, and I felt my stomach turn. That was the moment it hit me. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't a mistake. This was real, and I was nothing more than a ghost in my own life. I stood there for what felt like forever, unable to move. The betrayal was more than just a kiss. It was everything. It was the way Ingrid had allowed herself to be consumed by him, to forget everything we had built. And I knew, in that moment, that I wasn't part of her world anymore. I turned to leave, but before I could make it to the door, I heard a voice. Ingrid's voice. She had seen me. "Oliver," she called out, her tone shocked but calm. "What are you doing here?" I froze, my hand on the door handle. There was nothing left to say. No more questions, no more explanations. I couldn't ask her why she did this. I already knew the answer. I couldn't ask her to stay, because I knew she never would. I turned around, facing her. My heart was heavy, but my voice was steady. "I know," I said. "I know about you and Julian." The silence between us was deafening. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the flicker of hesitation. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. And in that moment, I realized that the woman I thought I knew had already gone. "Why?" I whispered, barely able to form the word. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her silence said it all. I wasn't the one she wanted, and I never would be again. I walked out of the cafe, leaving Ingrid and Julian behind. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it didn't matter anymore. I had the truth. And while it hurt like nothing else, it was the only thing I needed now. I didn't go back to the apartment that night. I couldn't. The weight of the truth felt like 1,000 bricks pressing down on my chest, suffocating me with every breath I took. I had seen enough. Ingrid, Julian, the way they looked at each other. It was more than just an affair. It was the end of everything I had ever known. I didn't know where to go, but I didn't want to be alone either. So I drove. My car seemed like the only place where I could be alone with my thoughts, a place where the madness could subside, but it never did. I drove for hours, losing track of time. Eventually, I ended up at the beach, miles away from the city, parked on a quiet stretch of sand. The salty air felt strangely soothing, but it couldn't numb the pain. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the realization that my life was never really mine. Ingrid had been living a double life, one that I never saw coming. She had checked out long before I did, and I was left with nothing but empty promises. I stayed there, watching the waves crash, thinking about everything that had led up to this moment. Had I missed the signs? Could I have prevented it? I asked myself these questions over and over, but the answers never came. By the time I returned home, the sun had come up, but there was no warmth in it for me. The apartment felt colder than ever. Ingrid's things were still here, her presence lingering in the air like a ghost I couldn't escape. She wasn't home. I figured she would be gone by now. I didn't know where she would go. To Julian, probably. But what would she even say? Would she apologize? Would she feel any guilt for what she had done? I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where she had been just hours ago. The silence was deafening, and I found myself questioning everything. Minutes passed, then hours. I kept waiting for her to walk through the door, but she never did. And just when I thought I had exhausted every possible scenario in my head, the door opened. It was Ingrid. But this time, something was different. There was no forced smile, no casual greeting. She walked in like a stranger, her eyes swollen from crying. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. She dropped her bag on the floor and stood there, looking at me with a mixture of guilt and resignation. "Oliver," she began, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want you to find out this way." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "How did you want me to find out, Ingrid?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I couldn't help it. "I'm sorry," she said, looking down at her hands. "I never meant to hurt you. It just happened, and then I couldn't stop it. I never thought it would get this far." I shook my head. "You never thought it would get this far? You've been planning this, haven't you? You've been planning to leave me for him." She didn't respond right away, and in that silence, I realized that I already knew everything I needed to. I knew she was leaving, and I knew why. The truth was clear, and nothing she said could change it. "I didn't want to lie to you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "But I didn't know how to tell you. How do you tell someone you've stopped loving them? How do you tell them you've found someone else?" "By being honest," I replied, the anger rising in my chest. "By not hiding it behind lies and broken promises." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know, and I'm sorry for all of it. But I can't keep pretending. I can't keep living a lie." I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside me. There was no point in arguing anymore. There was nothing left to salvage. "So what now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ingrid hesitated before answering, her gaze dropping to the floor. "I'm leaving, Oliver. I've made up my mind. I need to be with Julian. I'm sorry for everything. I truly am." I couldn't bring myself to say anything else. What was left to say? She had already made her choice. She had already chosen him. As she turned to leave, I watched her go, knowing that was the last time I would ever see her. The door clicked shut behind her, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the silence felt permanent. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my marriage, was a lie, and I had to face it alone. The apartment felt hollow after Ingrid left. I wandered aimlessly through the rooms, touching things that used to mean something. Our wedding photos on the mantel, the coffee mugs we always drank from in the morning, the old couch where we spent so many nights together. They were all just remnants of a life that no longer existed. The silence was unbearable. I couldn't even remember the last time I had felt truly alone. It wasn't just the absence of Ingrid. It was the absence of everything I thought I knew about myself, about us. I tried to distract myself by going to work the next day. I told myself that keeping busy would help me move on, that it would keep my mind off the gaping hole left behind. But every time I picked up the phone or sat at my desk, I couldn't focus. Thoughts of Ingrid, of Julian, kept intruding. When I finally came home that evening, I did something I hadn't done in days. I went into her study. It was the one place I had avoided since the night I found her journal. But I needed answers. I needed to understand how everything had gone so wrong. The room felt suffocating, and I almost turned back. But I didn't. I walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and pulled out the last thing I hadn't looked at, Ingrid's phone. I had no right to look through it, but my desperation overpowered any sense of decency. As I scrolled through the messages, I found the usual mix of work emails and group texts. But then I saw it. A message from Julian. "I can't wait to see you tonight. It feels like we've been waiting forever." The words hit me like a slap in the face. It wasn't just that she had been seeing him behind my back. It was the tone, the eagerness, the way she couldn't wait to be with him. And I realized something I hadn't admitted to myself before. She wasn't just leaving me. She had already left me a long time ago. Julian was the man she wanted. I was just the man she had to leave behind. But then, something else caught my eye. A message from Ingrid to Julian, sent only a few hours before she left. It was simple, but it made my heart stop. I'm so sorry for everything. I wish it hadn't come to this, but I can't keep lying. It's time. I'll be with you soon. I dropped the phone on the desk. My mind was reeling. I had known she was leaving, but seeing the words, seeing the way she had already made peace with it, it hurt more than I had imagined. I didn't know how long I stood there, just staring at the phone. The reality of everything felt too heavy to bear. Ingrid had already checked out. I wasn't just losing her. I was losing the person I thought I was, the person I had been for all these years. I walked out of the room, feeling like I was suffocating in my own home. The truth was undeniable now. Ingrid was gone, and no amount of wishing or waiting would bring her back. The hardest part? I realized I hadn't been enough for her, and I didn't know if I would ever be enough for anyone again. The days bled into one another. The apartment, once filled with laughter and the hum of life, felt like a museum to a life that was no longer mine. Every room seemed to whisper memories of things I would never get back. I spent my time pacing, trying to avoid the inevitable feelings that were catching up to me. But no matter how hard I tried, the truth was always there, lurking just beneath the surface. Ingrid was gone. I knew that. But it wasn't until a week later that I learned just how far her life had moved on without me. I had been trying to put myself back together, forcing myself to go out with friends, trying to pretend like I was okay. But nothing worked. There was a void in me, and no amount of distraction could fill it. One night, I found myself scrolling through the old photos on my phone. Our wedding day, vacations, birthdays, all of it. I wasn't just grieving the loss of my wife. I was grieving the loss of my identity. That night, I decided to do something I hadn't done since Ingrid left. I went through the rest of her things. I couldn't keep avoiding it. I needed to know how deeply she had already moved on. I found something I wasn't prepared for. A small box, hidden away in the back of her closet, tucked beneath the floorboards. It wasn't just full of clothes or forgotten shoes. The box was neatly wrapped, like it had been intentionally preserved. Inside, I found a letter addressed to Julian. I didn't want to open it. I knew it would destroy me, but my curiosity got the better of me. With trembling hands, I unfolded the paper. The words burned through me, each one a knife to my chest. Julian, this is it. I've made the hardest decision of my life. I'm leaving Oliver. It's not because he's a bad person, but because I'm not the person I used to be with him. I've been pretending for so long, and I can't keep lying. You are the one I've chosen, the one I want to build a future with. I'll be with you soon, and I hope we can finally start the life we've talked about. Reading those words was like a physical blow. She hadn't just fallen for him. She had planned it. She had made that choice long before I had any idea. I wasn't even a part of her life anymore. She had already written me out, and here was the proof. She had been plotting her escape, making arrangements to leave me behind without any remorse. The worst part wasn't the letter itself. It was the realization that she had been living this double life while I was none the wiser. For months, she had been carefully constructing a future with Julian, while I clung to a lie, thinking everything was fine. I stood there, paralyzed by the truth. This wasn't just an affair. It was an entire life she had built, and I had been completely shut out of it. The anger that had been simmering inside me exploded. I threw the box across the room, the letter fluttering to the floor. I wanted to scream, to break something. But the tears came instead. Not just tears of betrayal, but of helplessness. I had no control over this anymore. She was gone, and no matter what I did, I couldn't get her back. And just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, I heard a sound from the doorway. I turned, and there she was, Ingrid, standing in the frame, staring at me with wide, guilty eyes. She had come back, but it was too late for apologies now. I froze when I saw Ingrid standing there, her eyes wide with shock. It was as if I had caught her in the act, but I wasn't sure if she was even surprised to be caught. Her gaze shifted from the box on the floor to the letter crumpled in my hand, and then back to me. Oliver, she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. I didn't mean for you to find that. I couldn't even respond at first. My entire body was stiff with the weight of everything crashing down on me. Here she was, standing in front of me after weeks of absence, after weeks of pretending nothing had changed, as if I hadn't just uncovered the truth that shattered everything. The truth that she had planned this escape with Julian long before I'd even realized she had one foot out the door. I finally found my voice, though it came out in a low, bitter whisper. You didn't mean for me to find it? What exactly was the plan, Ingrid? For me to just stay in the dark while you built a new life with him? She flinched, but didn't answer immediately. She seemed to be gathering her thoughts, but whatever she had prepared felt weak, empty. It was as if she knew nothing she said could make this any better. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want her to try to explain herself anymore. I thought I was being fair, she said finally, her voice breaking. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want to see you like this, but I couldn't stay. I couldn't stay in a life that wasn't mine anymore. I looked at her in disbelief. Fair? You think abandoning me is fair? You've been lying to me for months, Ingrid. You've been planning to leave, and all I've been doing is waiting for you to come home, thinking everything was fine. Her eyes welled with tears. I never wanted it to be like this. I never meant to hurt you, but you've been so blind, Oliver. You've been so focused on holding on to a life that didn't make sense for either of us. I shook my head, overwhelmed by the suffocating anger building inside me. And you think you're the victim here? You're the one who cheated, the one who lied, and you're standing here acting like I'm the problem? Ingrid took a deep breath, as if she was bracing herself for something. Then she stepped forward, her voice quieter now. I never wanted to hurt you, but I fell in love with him. I've been in love with him for months, and I couldn't keep pretending anymore. I needed to be honest with myself, and with you. The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't breathe. I felt like everything inside me had shattered at once. She had loved him. She had been in love with him, while I had been the fool, the one left in the dark, the one who had trusted her with everything. I dropped the letter to the floor, unable to hold on to it any longer. So that's it then? You're leaving. You've already made your choice. Ingrid nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I don't want to, but I have to. I've already chosen him. I stood there, feeling like the ground beneath me had disappeared. The woman I loved, the woman I had spent years with, had already made her decision. And no matter how much I begged or pleaded, it wouldn't change anything. For a long time, we just stood there in silence. Ingrid, crying, and me, numb. I had no words left to say. What was there left to say? The truth was out, and nothing would ever be the same again. Finally, Ingrid wiped her eyes and looked up at me. I'm sorry, Oliver. I really am. But this is something I need to do for myself. You deserve someone who can love you the way you need. I'm just not that person. I couldn't look at her anymore. I couldn't listen to her apologies. I couldn't even hear her say she was sorry, because it didn't matter. Nothing she said could undo the damage. Nothing could bring back the trust she had taken from me. With a final glance, Ingrid turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, once again alone in the apartment we had shared. The door clicked shut behind her, and I felt an odd sense of relief wash over me. As much as it hurt, as much as it crushed me to know that she had already made her choice, there was a part of me that felt free. Maybe, just maybe, I would finally be able to move on. But there was still one thing I had to do. I couldn't let her go without hearing the truth, the whole truth. I needed to confront Julian. The days after Ingrid left were a blur. The emptiness of the apartment seemed to stretch on forever. I barely ate, barely slept. It was as if I was walking through someone else's life, a life that no longer made sense. The weight of everything, the lies, the betrayal, the feeling of being abandoned, threatened to crush me every moment. But there was something inside me, a small flicker of resolve, that told me I couldn't let this define me. I couldn't let her actions dictate the rest of my life. I thought about Julian, the man who had taken my wife, who had wormed his way into a life that didn't belong to him. I knew I had to confront him, not for revenge, but for closure. I needed to look him in the eyes and see the man who thought he could take everything from me. So I found him. It wasn't difficult. Ingrid's messages had been more than enough to point me in the right direction. I drove to a small cafe on the outskirts of town, the same place I had seen them together. When I walked in, Julian was sitting at the corner table, looking relaxed, unaware that his world was about to come crashing down. I approached him. He looked up, his expression changing from one of casual indifference to surprise as he saw me standing there. For a moment, Neither of us spoke. The tension between us was thick, like a heavy fog. "Julian," I said, my voice steady, though my insides were churning. "We need to talk." He put his cup down, an uneasy smile forming on his face. "Oliver, I wasn't expecting this. What do you want?" I sat down across from him, looking him directly in the eyes. "I want you to understand something. You didn't just steal my wife from me. You didn't just break my trust. You took my life, the one I thought was mine. But that stops today." His smile faltered. "Look, man, I didn't ask for any of this. Ingrid's the one who. I'm not here to listen to your excuses." I cut him off. "I'm here because I need you to understand the damage you've done. You and her both. What you've done isn't just an affair. It's not just cheating. It's destroying a life. And you've had your fun, but there's something you need to know." He leaned in, now clearly uncomfortable. "What do you mean?" I leaned back, the anger and frustration slowly turning into something else, a strange sense of clarity. "Ingrid thinks she's free, that she's built a new life with you. But here's the thing. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not here to fight for her. I'm here because I've realized that this is her choice. But her choices won't make her happy. Not in the way she thinks." I paused, letting my words sink in. "She'll be back. And when she does, she'll realize she made a mistake. I won't be there waiting for her. But I won't let you think you've won. The truth is, you don't know her like I do. And when reality sets in, you'll both realize you've lost something far more valuable than you thought." Julian's expression hardened, but he didn't say anything. He couldn't. I could see the cracks forming in his confident demeanor. He knew, deep down, that I was right. I stood up, leaving him to stew in his own uncertainty. "I'm done with this, Julian. But remember this. Life has a funny way of turning things around. You'll see." I walked out of the cafe, feeling a sense of liberation wash over me. I didn't need to get revenge. I didn't need to make Ingrid or Julian suffer. The universe had its way of righting wrongs. And I was done being the victim. In the weeks that followed, things started to fall into place in ways I never expected. Ingrid reached out once, trying to explain herself, but I didn't pick up. I didn't need to hear it. She had made her decision, and so had I. I wasn't going to let her destroy my sense of self-worth any longer. I started focusing on myself again. I went back to old hobbies I had neglected, started working out, and reconnected with old friends. Slowly, I began to rediscover who I was without her. And though it wasn't easy, it was empowering. Then, one day, I received a call from Ingrid. She was in tears, apologizing profusely, saying that she had made the biggest mistake of her life. But I had already moved on. I told her that I was happy with where I was, and that I wasn't interested in reopening old wounds. She didn't take it well, but it didn't matter anymore. Months later, I found out that Ingrid and Julian's relationship had crumbled. The fairy tale she thought she had built was shattered. She was alone, facing the consequences of her own choices. As for me, I realized that I had been given a second chance. Not just at life, but at happiness. I was free to write my own story now, one where I wasn't defined by someone else's betrayal. The best part? I knew that the real victory wasn't about making Ingrid or Julian pay. It was about me taking back my life and choosing my own happiness on my terms. In the end, life had a way of balancing things out, even when you didn't expect it. Please like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. I read them all.